In the hallowed wood-paneled halls of Providence Municipal Court, where the air hums with the low murmur of routine justice, a case file landed on Judge Frank Caprio's desk that was anything but ordinary. It was a Tuesday morning, the docket filled with the usual traffic violations and minor disputes, but this one file stopped him cold. The name was Emily Parker, a 29-year-old woman, and the charges were 6 separate parking violations, all astonishingly issued within the span of a single week across different locations in Providence. Judge Caprio, a man who had seen nearly every conceivable human folly pass through his courtroom, found himself genuinely perplexed. 6 tickets in 7 days wasn't just unusual, it was a statistical anomaly that suggested either profound carelessness or a story far more complex than the paper suggested. He adjusted his glasses, ready to call the case, but as he looked up towards the courtroom entrance, his confusion deepened into complete bafflement. A young woman, poised and composed, was making her way forward, accompanied by a beautiful golden retriever in a service vest. By her side, the rhythmic tap of a white cane echoed softly on the polished floor, a sound that cut through the courtroom's ambient noise. This was Emily Parker, and the immediate, glaring contradiction was overwhelming. How could a person who is clearly blind accumulate 6 parking tickets? The very premise seemed impossible. Emily didn't drive. She had never held a driver's license, never sat behind the wheel of a car, and certainly didn't own one. Yet here she was, facing a cascade of citations from multiple parking enforcement officers who had sworn in their reports that they personally witnessed her exiting vehicles parked in violation zones. The story that would unfold in Judge Caprio's courtroom would do more than simply dismiss Emily's tickets. It would pull back the curtain on a deeply ingrained, systemic problem. A toxic cocktail of lazy assumptions, damaging stereotypes, and the unsettling truth that for some, the sight of a disabled person living a fully independent life is so threatening, so contradictory to their worldview, that they would rather believe in an elaborate lie than accept a simple truth. This case was destined to become a landmark moment, a testament to how prejudice can fester in the most unexpected corners of bureaucracy, and how one woman's determined fight for her own dignity could spark a revolution in an entire city's policies. By the time the gavel fell, Emily Parker and her loyal guide dog, Leo, would transform from defendants into symbols of a powerful movement, and Judge Caprio's compassionate and decisive response would be etched into his legacy as one of his most profound and important rulings. The central question that hung in the air was as poignant as it was infuriating. What happens when your very independence, the success you fought so hard to achieve, makes people so uncomfortable that they default to assuming you are a fraud? Emily Parker, standing tall before the bench, was about to provide the definitive answer. The bailiff's voice boomed. Calling Emily Parker. 6 parking violations, multiple locations. As Emily and Leo entered, a quiet hush fell over the room. Leo moved with a practiced grace, his gait perfectly synchronized with Emily's, his presence a silent declaration of purpose and partnership. Emily herself exuded a quiet confidence. She was professionally dressed, her movements deliberate and sure as her cane found the path ahead. This was not a picture of helplessness. This was a portrait of someone who had thoroughly mastered the art of independent living in a world not built for her. Judge Caprio, breaking from his usual judicial decorum, rose slightly from his chair as a sign of respect. "Good morning, Miss Parker," he began, his voice gentle. "Please allow me to help you find the podium." Emily offered a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you, Your Honor, but I've got it. Leo and I make a point to practice courthouse layouts before any visits." Her voice was calm, clear, and utterly assured, further dismantling any preconceived notions of fragility. She reached the defendant's podium flawlessly, Leo settling at her feet with a quiet sigh, the picture of professional obedience. Judge Caprio, both impressed and still deeply puzzled, leaned into his microphone. "Miss Parker, I must confess, I am at a loss before we even begin. The file before me details 6 parking violations issued to you across the city in just 1 week. Yet it is clear to me that you are accompanied by a guide dog, and your file confirms that you are legally blind. Can you please help me understand what is happening here?" Emily took a steadying breath, her expression a mixture of practiced patience and deep-seated frustration. This was a story she had been forced to tell before, a narrative of disbelief she was weary of repeating. "Your Honor," she began, her voice resonating with clarity, "I do not drive. I have never driven a car in my life, and I do not own a vehicle. Every single one of those citations was issued directly to me, in my name, not to a vehicle. This happened because the parking enforcement officers who wrote them made a series of incorrect and deeply offensive assumptions. They assumed I was the driver. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with disbelief. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm sorry, they assumed? Please, explain this to me." Emily continued, "I rely on rideshare services, Your Honor. Uber and Lyft are my primary means of transportation to work, to appointments, to live my life. On occasion, for my safety and convenience, drivers will pull over in places they technically shouldn't park, but only for the few seconds it takes me to safely exit the vehicle with Leo. What has been happening is that when certain parking officers see me, a woman with a white cane and a guide dog, getting out of a car, their minds jump to a conclusion that defies logic. Some of them simply do not believe I am blind." The statement hung in the air, its implications stunning. "Miss Parker," the judge clarified, wanting to be absolutely certain he understood the absurdity of the situation, "you are stating that parking enforcement officers witnessed you exiting a vehicle and, despite the clear presence of your guide dog and your white cane, concluded that you were the driver." "Yes, Your Honor," Emily confirmed. "They saw all the evidence of my visual impairment and instead concluded that I was faking my disability, perhaps to get out of a ticket that should have gone to the driver. So instead of citing the actual driver or the vehicle, they wrote the tickets directly to me, the passenger." Judge Caprio's expression shifted from confusion to a slow-burning anger. He struggled to keep his composure. "Let me be absolutely certain I understand this sequence of events. You exit a rideshare vehicle as a passenger. Officers observe you utilizing both a guide dog and a white cane, two universally recognized symbols of legal blindness. And their professional conclusion, their first instinct, is that you are pretending to be blind?" "That is correct, Your Honor," Emily said, her voice steady. "This happened 6 times in 1 week." Seeking more context, the judge asked, "Miss Parker, may I ask what you do for a living?" "I'm a graphic designer, Your Honor," she replied. "I use adaptive technology, screen readers, tactile displays, and specialized software to do my work. I work remotely for a design firm based in Boston." The information landed with significant weight. A blind graphic designer, a profession that seemed intrinsically visual, using advanced technology to excel in a demanding field. This was a woman who was not just functional. She was highly skilled, independent, and successful. And it was precisely that independence, that paradoxical competence, that had landed her in this courtroom. Judge Caprio gestured towards the file on his desk. "Let's go through these citations one by one, Miss Parker. The first was issued on Monday, March 15th at 8:47 a.m. on Westminster Street. Can you tell me what happened?" Emily consulted a small device in her hand, her fingers moving swiftly over its surface as she read her Braille notes. "That morning, I was on my way to a client meeting downtown. My Uber driver pulled into a passenger loading zone to drop me right in front of the building. The entire stop took no more than 30 seconds. As I was getting my bag organized and making sure Leo was ready, a parking officer approached the car and demanded to see my license." "Your driver's license?" the judge asked, his voice laced with incredulity. "Yes, Your Honor. I explained calmly that I don't have one because I don't drive, that I was merely a passenger in a rideshare." He looked at me, then down at Leo, and then back at me, and he said something I will never forget. "I saw you get out of the driver's seat." Which was impossible. I was in the back seat on the passenger side. "And did you explain this to him?" Judge Caprio pressed. "I tried to, Your Honor. I repeated that I was blind, that I used these services to get around, and that the driver had already pulled away. He just shook his head and said, and I am quoting him directly, 'You don't look blind, you're looking right at me.'" Judge Caprio's jaw clenched. The sheer ignorance of the statement was galling. He said, "You don't look blind." "Yes, Your Honor. It's a comment I hear far more often than you might imagine. Because I have some residual light perception, and I've trained myself to orient my face toward the source of a voice, people often assume I can see more than I can. They fail to understand that legal blindness is a wide spectrum, not a simple on-off switch." The judge made extensive notes, his pen scratching furiously against the paper. "And he proceeded to issue the citation to you anyway." "Yes, Your Honor." He wrote my name down and handed it to me. When I attempted to explain the situation one more time, he cut me off and said if I wanted to contest it, I could take it up in court. The judge sighed. A deep, frustrated sound. Let's proceed to citation number 2. The following day, March 16th, on Hope Street at 3:15 p.m. That was for a doctor's appointment, Emily recalled. It was a different driver, a different officer, but fundamentally the same infuriating situation. I exited from the back seat with Leo, and a female officer was already approaching. This time, her tone wasn't as aggressive, but it was just as skeptical, perhaps even more condescending. She asked me how it was possible for me to be blind if I could navigate so well, as if the very concepts of mobility training and guide dogs were a complete mystery to her. Judge Caprio pulled up the officer's notes for that specific citation on his monitor, his eyes narrowing as he read. Miss Parker, this officer has documented her disbelief. She wrote, and I quote, "Subject claims visual impairment but demonstrated full awareness of surroundings and made direct eye contact. She literally used your competence as a justification for the citation." Emily nodded, a sad resignation in her expression. Yes, Your Honor. It's the paradox that so many disabled people face. Because I am competent and independent, I am deemed suspicious. If we are too capable, people think we're faking our disability. If we require too much assistance, people see us as helpless burdens. It often feels like there is no acceptable middle ground in the eyes of the public. He continued through the rest of the citations, each story echoing the last with haunting similarity. A drop-off near a grocery store, another outside her friend's apartment. Each time, Emily would exit a rideshare vehicle, and an officer would see her, Leo, and her cane. And each time, instead of recognizing these as tools of independence, they interpreted them as props in an act of fraud. They consistently bypassed the driver and cited Emily directly. By the time he reached the 6th and final citation, issued on the Friday of that same exhausting week, Judge Caprio was visibly and righteously angry. Ms. Parker, this last citation. This one has a note from the officer that I find personally offensive. He wrote, "Subject too well-dressed and articulate to be actually blind." The courtroom gasped collectively. The statement was a bald admission of prejudice based on the most superficial stereotypes. Emily's voice remained calm, a testament to her strength, but the pain underneath was unmistakable. Your Honor, I have spent my entire adult life meticulously building a world of independence for myself. I dedicated myself to learning how to use technology that allows me to have a fulfilling career. I trained with Leo for months, an intense process of bonding and learning to trust each other implicitly. I have memorized routes, landmarks, and the sounds of my city. I refuse to allow my visual impairment to define the limits of what I can achieve. And now, that very independence, the success I have fought for, is being used as evidence against me in a court of law. It feels like I am being punished for succeeding. Judge Caprio sat back in his chair, the full weight of the situation settling upon him. This was not about parking, it was about prejudice. Miss Parker, I need to ask you an important question. Have you attempted to resolve this with the city before coming to court today? Yes, Your Honor. After the third ticket, I called the parking enforcement department. I explained the entire situation, hoping for some common sense to prevail. I was told that my only option was to contest them in court, which is why I am here today. But the person on the phone also told me, and again I am quoting, that fraud is common and they had to protect city revenue. The judge's eyes widened. They said that protecting city revenue justified citing a blind woman for parking violations she physically could not have committed? That's what they told me, Your Honor, Emily confirmed. Judge Caprio slowly turned his gaze to the city prosecutor, a man who was now looking profoundly uncomfortable. Counselor, the judge's voice was low and dangerous. Has the city had an opportunity to review Miss Parker's case prior to this morning? The prosecutor shifted his weight, avoiding the judge's stare. Your Honor, I must admit I only received this file this morning. However, upon even a preliminary review, it is abundantly clear that none of these citations should have been issued to Ms. Parker personally. If there was a violation, they should have been issued to the vehicle operators, if at all. Judge Caprio seized on the last two words. If at all. Yes, Your Honor. the prosecutor conceded. The city ordinance allows for brief stops for passenger loading and unloading. Most of these stops, according to the officer's own notes, appear to have been under 1 minute. It's highly probable that there were no actual violations committed in the first place. The judge's expression darkened further. So, let me summarize. Ms. Parker was cited 6 times for violations that likely never even occurred by officers who openly disbelieved her disability was real, and when she tried to report this injustice, the city's official response was to tell her to fight it in court rather than investigate the outrageous conduct of its own officers. The prosecutor had no defense. That appears to be an accurate summary, Your Honor. At this moment, Emily spoke up, her voice firm. Your Honor, if I may add something, please. Proceed, Ms. Parker. After I filed my initial complaint with the city and was dismissed, I realized this might be a bigger issue. I did some research and contacted the National Federation of the Blind. I asked if other members in Providence had experienced anything similar. Your Honor, within 2 days, I had received 47 responses from other blind individuals in this city alone who had been unjustly cited for parking violations while using rideshare services. 47. This isn't just an isolated incident or a few bad officers, it's a systemic problem. The courtroom began to murmur. The scope of the injustice had just exploded. This wasn't about 6 tickets anymore, it was about a pattern of discrimination. Judge Caprio then asked the question that was now on everyone's mind. Ms. Parker, in your view, why would parking enforcement officers systematically disbelieve blind passengers? Emily's answer was both simple and profoundly insightful. Because, Your Honor, we don't fit their mental image of what blindness is supposed to look like. They expect to see helplessness. They expect someone who is completely dependent, someone being led around passively. When they encounter someone like me, someone using technology, navigating independently, communicating clearly, holding a professional job, it creates a cognitive dissonance. Their brain tells them that something must be wrong with the picture. And rather than challenge and update their outdated understanding of what blind people are capable of, it's easier for them to assume we're the ones who are lying. She continued, her voice gaining strength. I use a smartphone with advanced screen reader technology. I have applications that use the camera to identify objects, read printed text aloud, and even describe complex scenes using artificial intelligence. Leo is a highly trained guide, capable of navigating me through the most complex urban environments. I can work, I can shop, I can travel, I can live a full and independent life. But to some people, that level of functionality means I can't possibly really be blind, because in their minds, blindness is synonymous with inability. When the reality of my life contradicts their stereotype, they choose to believe the stereotype over the evidence of their own eyes. Just then, an older woman in the courtroom gallery slowly raised her hand. Judge Caprio noticed her. Yes, ma'am. You wish to speak? Using a white cane to steady herself, she stood. Your Honor, may I address the court? Of course. Please state your name. My name is Dorothy Chen. I am 72 years old and I have been blind since birth. What this courageous young woman is describing is something I have experienced my entire life, in one form or another. When I applied for college in 1970, university administrators tried to refuse my admission because they simply could not believe a blind person could handle the coursework. When I secured my first job as a transcriptionist, some of my coworkers accused me of faking my condition because I could type quickly and use a multi-line telephone. My independence, my entire life, has been viewed not with respect, but with suspicion. She turned her head toward the sound of Emily's voice, though she couldn't see her. This young woman represents a new generation, one that rightfully refuses to be limited by other people's ignorant assumptions, and she is being systematically punished for it. That isn't just wrong, Your Honor. It's cruel. A wave of quiet, respectful applause rippled through the courtroom. Judge Caprio nodded, his expression one of deep respect. Ma'am, thank you for sharing that powerful perspective with us. He paused for a long moment, collecting his thoughts, before speaking with an intensity that commanded the absolute attention of everyone in the room. Ms. Parker, I am going to make several rulings today. First, and most obviously, all 6 of these citations against you are dismissed with prejudice, effective immediately. These should never have been written. Emily nodded, a wave of relief washing over her. Thank you, Your Honor. But I am not stopping there, the judge continued, his voice hardening. Miss Parker, you brought to this court's attention the cases of 47 other blind individuals in Providence who have faced similar harassment. Therefore, I am ordering the city to conduct a comprehensive and immediate review of all parking citations issued to individuals with documented visual impairments over the past 5 years. The prosecutor shot to his feet. Your Honor, with all due respect, that could be hundreds of cases. Then you will review hundreds of cases, the judge thundered back. Any citation found to have been issued directly to a blind passenger rather than to a vehicle operator will be summarily dismissed, and any fines paid will be fully refunded with interest. Is that understood, Counselor? Yes, Your Honor, the prosecutor mumbled, sinking back into his chair. But Judge Caprio was not finished. Additionally, I am hereby ordering mandatory disability awareness and sensitivity training for all parking enforcement officers in the city of Providence. This will not be optional. It will be a condition of their employment to be completed within the next 90 days. When the prosecutor began to stammer about budgets, the judge cut him off. The cost is irrelevant when compared to the profound cost of systematic discrimination against your own disabled residents. This training will be comprehensive. It will cover not only visual impairments but also mobility impairments and invisible disabilities. It will educate officers on assistive technology, on what a guide dog represents, on what a white cane signifies, and on the fundamental principle that independence in a disabled person is normal, admirable, and to be respected, not viewed with suspicion. The judge's voice grew even stronger, filling the courtroom. Furthermore, I am ordering the city to work with disability advocates to create a new, clear, and unambiguous protocol for rideshare drop-offs involving disabled passengers. Drivers must be given a reasonable and protected window of time to safely discharge passengers with assistive devices without fear of citation. This new policy will be communicated directly to the rideshare companies as well as to every single parking enforcement officer. He then looked directly at Emily, his expression softening. Ms. Parker, you mentioned your work in graphic design and the adaptive technology you use. For the benefit of the court and the public record, could you explain a little more about that? Emily, though surprised, answered readily. Of course, Your Honor. My primary tool is screen reader software, which converts all visual information on my computer screen, text, icons, menus, into synthesized audio. I also use a device called a refreshable braille display, which connects to my computer and raises and lowers small pins to form braille characters, allowing me to read text with my fingertips. For my design work, I use advanced programs that provide audio descriptions of visual elements like colors, shapes, and spatial layouts. I can create sophisticated digital designs that are indistinguishable from those created by my sighted colleagues. And Leo, the judge prompted gently. What is his role in your independence? Emily's hand instinctively dropped to touch her guide dog's head, a gesture of deep affection. Leo is my partner. He is trained to navigate around obstacles, to stop at curbs and stairs, to alert me to overhead hazards, and to guide me safely through crowded and complex spaces. He has been with me for 3 years. He's not just an assistant, Your Honor. He is the physical embodiment of my independence and freedom. Judge Caprio turned his attention to the entire courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice resonating with authority. What we have learned today is a powerful lesson. Our assumptions about disability are not just outdated, they are actively harmful and create barriers to equality. Ms. Parker is a skilled professional, a contributing member of her community who lives independently and navigates her city with a confidence many of us could learn from. She should be celebrated for her resilience and capability, not harassed and punished with baseless citations. He turned back to Emily one last time. Miss Parker, I want to offer my sincerest apology on behalf of this city and this court for what you have been forced to endure. You have been treated unjustly by officials who should have known better, who should have been trained to do better. I assure you, that ends today. Thank you, Your Honor, Emily said. But if I may, this was never just about me. It's about those 47 other people and the countless others who were too intimidated to report it. They are the ones who truly deserve justice. And they will get it, the judge promised. I am assigning a special magistrate to oversee the entire review process and the implementation of these new policies. Every single case will be examined. Every individual who was wronged will receive a formal apology and a full refund. And any officer found to have a pattern of issuing these discriminatory citations will face significant retraining or disciplinary action. As Emily prepared to leave, Judge Caprio had one final statement. Ms. Parker, before you go, it is vital that you understand something. What was litigated here today wasn't just about parking tickets, it was about your dignity. Emily and Leo paused at the courtroom door. You have every right to live independently, to utilize the technology that enables you to excel in your profession, to navigate your city with confidence, and to refuse to be constrained by anyone's narrow, prejudiced definitions of what a blind person can or cannot do. When city officials questioned your independence, they were, in fact, questioning your fundamental human dignity. I understand, Your Honor, she said softly. I hope you do, he replied, because I am now going to ask something of you. Will you consider working with the city on the development of this new disability awareness training program? Your perspective, your lived experience, your expertise, that is precisely what these officers need to hear. Emily considered the offer for a moment, a thoughtful expression on her face. Your Honor, I would be honored to participate, but on one condition, that Dorothy Chen and official representatives from other disability advocacy organizations are included as equal partners in the process. A broad smile spread across Judge Caprio's face. Agreed. This will be a comprehensive program developed by the people who actually understand the reality of disability, not by bureaucrats who merely think they do. Dorothy Chen stood once more. Your Honor, the National Federation of the Blind would be proud and honored to participate. Inspired, several other people in the gallery stood as well, identifying themselves as members of various disability rights groups, all offering their assistance. Judge Caprio looked visibly moved. Then let us do this right. Miss Parker, you walked into this courtroom today to contest 6 unjust parking tickets. You are leaving as the catalyst for systemic change that will protect the rights and dignity of thousands of disabled residents in this city. Thank you, Your Honor, Emily said, but I couldn't have done any of this without Leo. She gave her guide dog an affectionate pat. He's the real hero here. Judge Caprio, allowing himself a moment of levity, addressed the dog directly, bringing a smile to everyone's face. Leo, you are a very good dog. An exceptionally good dog. And you take excellent care of your person. Leo's tail gave a few enthusiastic thumps against the floor, sensing the positive energy in the room. As Emily and Leo turned and walked out of the courtroom, the entire gallery rose to its feet in a spontaneous, heartfelt standing ovation. It was an applause not just for her victory, but for every disabled person who had ever fought for their independence, only to be punished for achieving it. Judge Caprio watched them go, a powerful symbol of grace and strength, before making one final statement to the now silent room. Let the record show that disability rights are human rights. Independence for disabled people is not suspicious. It is admirable. And any system, any policy, any individual that punishes competence instead of celebrating it is a system that is broken and needs to be changed. Today, in Providence, we began to change it. 6 months later, the city of Providence had implemented what was widely regarded as the most comprehensive disability awareness program for city employees in the entire country. The review ordered by Judge Caprio resulted in over 200 parking citations being dismissed and refunded. Emily Parker, inspired by her experience, went on to found a successful nonprofit organization that consults with cities nationwide on improving accessibility and disability rights policies. And Leo, in a heartwarming ceremony on the steps of City Hall, was named an honorary citizen of Providence, the very first service dog to ever receive such an honor, because some heroes wear capes and some, it turns out, wear service dog vests. Emily Parker walked into court that day facing injustice, but she walked out having fundamentally changed her city's understanding of what it means to be blind, capable, and free. And Judge Frank Caprio proved once again that the heart of true justice lies not just in resolving individual cases, but in having the wisdom to recognize systemic problems and the courage to fix them, ensuring that what happened to one person would never happen again.